Okay, so this is a discussion of the Heart Sutra, and we're going to begin by chanting the Heart Sutra, and then also chant the evening bell chant as well. Let's see. So now I'm gonna share my screen, share the sound.
Volume on that was very, very low.
The Maha Prajna.
Is that better? Oh, okay. All right, good. I'm gonna back it up and start from the beginning.
The Maha Prajna Paramita Hridaya
right. So now we've chanted the Heart Sutra, and now we can talk about the Heart Sutra. Now, I already got a question from Tom sent earlier by email. And so Tom's question was, or do you want to ask your question? Just go ahead and in your own words, put it out there.
Okay, sure, yeah. Well, pretty much, I think what I wrote there was, that in the Heart Sutra, it says, we attain or can attain Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, which means perfect enlightenment. But if we can attain perfect enlightenment, then that would suggest to me that there is less than perfect enlightenment.
Hmm.
And so, I mean, I can go out and Google stages of enlightenment, right?
Hmm.
And when I Google stages of enlightenment, I get returns for 3 stages, 4 stages, 5 stages,
Hmm.
7 stages, or 10 stages of enlightenment. And so, and I don't know if it's referring to, if the concept of perfect enlightenment is referring to something other than the stages, or if it refers to the final stage, whatever that, in whichever model you're
Hmm.
looking at. So I
Yeah.
thought that would be something I'd like to get a
Hmm.
little more clear on
Yeah.
and discuss. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. So that's a good question. And it raises another related question, which is um, the fact that words like enlightenment, realization, and awakening, those are three big ones, get thrown around a lot,
Yeah.
and or satori and kensho, um, and so what are people really talking about when they talk about those things? And sometimes you get a nice certificate. So Hakuin, great Zen master Hakuin, was big on. He gave certificates out to people who had attained Kensho. They were his dragon staff certificates, and but he found that he had to make sure that people understood this doesn't mean that you're enlightened now. Oh, to some people that was uh, a bit of a letdown. Um,
Yeah.
but what does it mean? And speaking of Hakuin, he himself, uh, and this is a place where it gets a little questionable in my opinion. Hakuin claimed to have attained final enlightenment at the ripe old age of, I believe, 42. Um, and uh, and he had in, and he had kept a record of his previous awakening experiences prior to that, and after his final enlightenment, he said that he then realized that all of his previous awakening experiences had been partial, and in fact, because he hadn't realized how partial they were actually somewhat of a barrier um, to him. Um, but yeah, but I mean, did Hakuin attain? I don't think he ever used the words Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, and I don't think that he ever went around saying I am a Buddha. Um, there are people who, well, so there are, you know, teachers who are referred to as living Buddhas sometimes, and there are some teachers that are referred to often posthumously as second Buddhas. Um, and how would I know? I would not be able to tell whether or not the difference between someone who is just a lot more enlightened than I am and someone who is all the way, to the stage of a Buddha. But in the Heart Sutra, definitely when it says Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, that is unquestionably, this is very clear. If you just a little more googling would probably get you there. But it's referring to the full enlightenment of a fully enlightened Buddha. And which again raises the question, well, what does that mean? What does it mean to be a fully enlightened Buddha with respect to all these other stages that there are? And so the Heart Sutra doesn't really go into that itself, but at the same time, uh, a lot of the people who have done commentaries on the Heart Sutra treat the Heart Sutra as in part a guide to the entire Bodhisattva path, which then include stages of realization and awakening and attainment that happen prior to becoming a fully enlightened Buddha. And you know, it referring to those as stages of enlightenment is people do that, but I think it's a little dangerous. But at the same time, though, so we do need words like great enlightenment or anuttara samyak sambodhi to make absolutely clear when we're really talking about the full thing. Um, and so definitely in now there is another there is in addition to anuttara samyak sambodhi there is a separate phrase great or perfect enlightenment. There's even a sutra called the Sutra of Perfect Enlightenment. And that is a little different. And I can dodge that one because it's not really in the Heart Sutra. The Heart Sutra definitely says Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, and that's clear what that means. That's referring to, and that's in other sutras as well, like in the Medicine Buddha Sutra, and in other sutras where there is a discussion of a being that has become a Buddha, and that is that Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi is what Shakyamuni Buddha attained under the Bodhi tree. It's what the Medicine Buddha attained, when he fulfilled his 12 great vows and became a Buddha. It's what Amitabha attained, when he fulfilled his 48 vows and became Amitabha. And so if get Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, you are a Buddha. And again, that leaves open the question of what is a Buddha, and how is that different from
So
yeah.
stages of it always kind of make sense to me that you would
Yeah.
have
Uh-huh.
a series of awakenings or
Mm-hmm.
epiphanies. Um, but then people also talk about sudden enlightenment.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I don't know about that, but the one thing I wanted to go to was, and I don't think it was, I don't know who it was, but I know there's a quote out
Uh-huh.
there. I almost can remember who it was, but that says, you may not be aware of your own enlightenment.
Mm-hmm.
And I resonate with that too,
Mm-hmm.
that you may not be aware. If you are enlightened,
Mm-hmm.
you may not be aware that that's the case.
What do you think, Catherine? Do you think you'd be aware of your own enlightenment? You're muted, but yeah.
I don't. Uh, I don't know.
Yeah. So personally, I think that the being unaware of your own enlightenment is still referring to, a something short of the enlightenment of a fully enlightened Buddha. One of the characteristics of a fully enlightened Buddha is that they are fully aware of their own state, and therefore they would be aware if they're enlightened. And then also, one of the great things about having Buddhas, and one of the reasons why it is a good thing to have Buddhas, is because they're aware of other people's state and where other people are at, and in particular they're aware of what other people need in order to help them advance on their path. Skillful
By the
means,
way,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
I
By
was
the
just saying, I think that quote is from Dogen. From
Dogen.
Dogen.
Ah, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
so right. And so another thing that muddies the water here is that, and one of the reasons why there is a sutra called the Sutra of Perfect Enlightenment, and this I'm getting into water that is pretty deep for me, but there is a thing called original enlightenment, which we all have, and which none of us know that we have, because if we knew that we had it, then we would be then we would really have it. We would be enlightened. And so that's Buddha nature, right? And so this introduces a whole if everybody has and it seems to be a contradiction, but at the same time it's not really as contradictory as it looks like on the surface, because if you don't have Buddha nature, you can never become enlightened. But if you have Buddha nature, you already have everything that you need to be enlightened. You just have to fully, realize it. And people can get really hung up on that. But like, when a baby is born, it already has the capacity to learn to speak and to walk, but it still has to, that capacity has to be developed.
Yeah.
And we all, and if you like I do, just and aside from Buddhism, you don't have to be a Buddhist to believe that human nature is fundamentally good. And this is a big philosophical question that many people have, and that can be very it's easy to see it from different sides. But if you come down on the side of thinking that human nature is fundamentally good, then, well, it's obvious that everybody isn't good all the time. So to have some potential, to have some innate nature, is different from expressing it, and learning how to express it. Yeah. And so there's original enlightenment, there's perfect enlightenment, and there's and Dogen also said only Buddha can teach Buddha. And so that's what I thought of as soon as you identified Dogen as saying that. I said, like, the only way that we can have any understanding of the Dharma is by way of our own Buddha nature.
Taking notes, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Only Buddha can teach Buddha. And of course, it can be hard to track down that quote, but it's in there. It's somewhere. And he may not have said it exactly like that. That might be my own paraphrase. But it's very close to what he said.
I have a quick question. When you said, what
Mm-hmm.
is Buddha? Like,
Mm-hmm.
we are Buddha,
Mm-hmm.
but what does that mean? Like, I know Buddha nature is that, well, actually, I'm not really quite sure even what that means.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but everything has Buddha nature. I think of it as inherent goodness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Or,
I think that's one of the best ways of describing Buddha nature.
so then what is Buddha? Is that the same thing?
Well, yeah. So, in if we and so, I mean, you took it a step further there, Catherine. Not just as human nature, people are fundamentally good, but that the whole universe, everything, the fundamental nature of things is good. Some people call it, I don't know. There's different ways of describing that, and that people you can get very metaphysical about that, but just but if you think that people are fundamentally good, and if you think that the world we live in is fundamentally good, and then you take a look around, it doesn't, the way our experiences, the way people act, the way things happen, there's floods and hurricanes and terrible disasters that happen to people, diseases, the ravages of age, and most of it seems quite unfair. And so how does that and I don't think that in any way contradicts the fundamental goodness of the universe or the fundamental goodness of human beings, but it means that when it comes to human behavior, it means people do not act in accord with their true nature,
Mm.
which is which is a positive, or is a cause for optimism, because it means we have the capacity to be better. um, Thankfully. But we also have seemingly an infinite capacity to not be better.
Mhm.
But yet, so does that, so how is Buddha nature different from, so what the difference between Buddha nature and being a Buddha is this, you know, difference between having the capacity and fully realizing it, I think. And
I
then, of
like
course, yeah, Tom, yeah,
I like the baby analogy. Yeah,
the which analogy?
the baby
Oh
analogy,
yeah,
having
yeah,
the
right,
capacity to walk.
hmm, right. And with the baby, it's more or less, it's close to being inevitable, but you can help along the way is good for walking it. And also, when a baby, so babies are born with the innate capacity to walk. On the one hand, it's good to help infants to learn how to walk and encourage them. Of course, that's what everybody always does, that whether it's good for them or not. But then as soon as they learn how to walk, or get, you have to watch them very carefully, because now they have a tremendous new capacity to injure themselves. And when they learn how to run, they have an even greater capacity to injure themselves. When they learn how to climb, they now have the capacity to kill themselves fairly easily. So it's not like just let things develop naturally because we have the natural capacity. These things actually take some care and watching over by people who know better than the person who's in the process of realizing their potential. In, you know, sometimes it can be a tricky business.
I was sitting here trying to, I can't, it's, the Diamond Sutra is so long and I can't
Oh,
remember everything
yeah.
in it without looking at it. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to find I
Uh
can't
huh.
even find the text of it.
Okay. Looks like you've got Zen Master Degok's book there.
Oh, I do. And I was trying to find in here, this is Going Beyond
Mm-hmm.
Buddha.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to find where it is, but he talked in there about the Diamond Sutra a little
Mm-hmm.
bit, but
Mm-hmm.
he talks, I'm sure you've read this,
Yeah.
Kurt,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
but he talks in there a lot about, like the bell, like a
Mm-hmm.
bell,
Mm-hmm.
and
Oh,
hearing the bell,
that's right.
and, like some of the Zen masters say, well, what did you hear? And the student will say, I heard a bell.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then, like, um, Sung San said, you're going to hell then. I mean, so I had a hard time understanding what in the
Uh-huh.
world are they talking about. Then after kind of reading this, I'm
Mm-hmm.
kind of understanding a little bit better that
Mm-hmm.
when I put a um, a word on something, it minimizes it, right? So instead of saying I heard a bell, if somebody asks me what did I hear, I don't know, would be a
Because
better answer, right?
I don't know is an okay answer. Yeah. So for that, I'm not. You know, you can't. There's no one size fits all answer. But I happen to have a bell right here. So one excellent answer is always, you know, that's one of the things that Zen Master Sung
Right.
San was always looking for, and it's
Yeah.
actually very easy to understand intellectually and to explain it. He wants you to show instead of tell. So if you
Right.
say,
I get
yeah,
that.
right, yeah,
But when they say like
mm-hmm,
there, Sung San said one time, tell me what you heard, and if you tell me it was a bell,
mm-hmm,
you're going to hell.
mm-hmm,
So in that, if you sat and rang the bell,
mm-hmm,
um, I'm not sure if that's right or not.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, because wouldn't it be, instead of even thinking of it as the bell,
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't it just be not thinking
Mm-hmm.
and just, just ring?
Yeah. Yeah. So potentially one could, in a situation like that, if you don't happen to have a bell handy, you could just say ding dong, or so. But a good Zen master would be able to tell if you're faking it or not. You would have to say ding dong in such a way that you were the bell, in such a way that someone, there someone would think that they were hearing a bell. Someone
Yeah.
would be hearing a bell. You know,
Hmm.
but it's always so it's interesting to talk about koans, but it's really necessary to do it, to work on it with the teacher. Teacher will kind of, the koan is really like a dance, okay? And the teacher picks the music and the teacher leads and you just follow.
Yeah.
And then you're dancing, and
Yeah.
and you might not be a very good dancer, but that's not really the point.
Oh, I just found something that he said
Okay.
about
Uh-huh.
Buddha. Um, he said in here, Buddha is everything. Sky is Buddha, tree is Buddha, you are Buddha, I'm Buddha, floor is Buddha, altar is Buddha. He goes on and on. All things are Buddha. Going beyond all that is going beyond. Holding nothing, abiding nowhere. We say living the homeless life. To live homelessly is to abide nowhere, and it means to die. To die in each moment, to die in each moment, to be reborn, fresh, alive, with no continuity. This is not something you can bring about at will, but it's a reality that is fundamental to all of us. So everybody's Buddha, even if they don't even know it. Yes.
That is
Right?
correct.
Or,
So that's true, but you want to be careful with that, because then the what does that lead to?
mhm.
And so, if one thing that it can lead to is saying, oh well, either thinking, oh, everybody's already enlightened, and therefore there's nothing to be done, or thinking, oh, Buddhism is a bunch of crap because it doesn't realize that people have problems that need working on, which is true.
Yeah.
And so there has to be you know balance is one way I think of it, and so balancing is a dynamic process. Balancing doesn't mean that something is nothing is ever balanced perfectly. You're always making corrections, you know, and so as soon as we find a solution to one of our problems, we tend to latch onto it and turn it into a brand new problem, sometimes worse than what we had before. I mean, because one of the main problems we have is we don't feel good, or we're not happy, or whatever. As soon as, and
Yeah.
the things we find that make us feel better, that make us happy, are quite often de- destructive. And I don't want to go too far down the road of politics, but and I'm not even going to mention names, but some people go to a political rally and somebody is whipping everybody up and telling you who is causing your problems, and people feel it gives people a people feel good when they know who they're supposed to be mad at. And people who are worried about their own petty problems, they go to some political rally and they get whipped up, and they forget all about their petty problems. They now know who to blame, and they feel better.
Mhm.
So there's good reason to be very suspicious of the mind that wants to fix problems, and to be very suspicious of people who come along offering us solutions to our problems, and to be able to see through that and to not fall for it. But at the same time, I have problems. And some, some of my problems are very practical, health problems, or money problems, or whatever, that that require practical solutions, and that I should not use my spiritual practice as an excuse to, like, not worry about money or not worry about my health. I should worry about my health. I should worry about, I mean, because it's just like, if you have a kid who's just learned how to walk, you'd better worry about, and you look around and you don't see that kid, you better worry about that, you have to taking care of things is not something that, just because we realize that we have Buddha nature and everything has Buddha nature, doesn't mean that we no longer have to take care of things. In fact, it's really the opposite. And this is one of the ways of, kind of gauging our own understanding. If we think we have some understanding of Buddha nature, or compassion, or emptiness, or whatever, and it makes us care more in a constructive way, not worry more or not fret more, but to be more, and to have a little more clarity about seeing what needs to be taken care of and what needs to be done, you know, then that's good. If we have some realization that leads to that. But if we have some realization that leads us to think that nothing matters, or that Buddhism is teaching us that nothing matters, then we have that Thich Nhat Hanh calls that uh, uh, grabbing the snake in the wrong way. You don't want to do that. Um, yeah, you don't want to grab the snake the wrong way, because then you get bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, he wrote a whole little book about that called Thundering Silence. Um, and it's I guess it's actually based on a sutra that I think is called the Sutra on the Correct Way of Handling a Snake. And incidentally, that particular sutra is all about, I think it's all about following the precepts. That's really all the sutra describes, is just follow the precepts, which basically means pay attention, don't hurt people, and do the right thing. It's more about paying attention, don't hurt people, and do the right thing, than it is about following a set of rules, in my opinion.
Um, so when I read the Diamond Sutra,
Hmm.
what I get out of it mostly is not to attach. It's kind
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
it's not to attach to anything.
Yeah.
Form is endless, or whatever. I can't remember. Form is something, and something is form.
Hmm.
Everything is. It kind of doesn't make sense. So when I pull back from it, it almost seems like it's just a nothingness,
Hmm.
you know.
Oh.
And like I found this thing in
Uh-huh.
Big Ox book, and it says about the bell and the drum.
Hmm.
A student named Songwall stood up and said, "If the rabbit's horn is correct, the sheep's horn is false." And Mangong, oh, this is about one day Zen Master Mangong said, "All Zen masters say that in the sound of the bell they attain alignment, and at the sound of the drum they fall down. Anyone who understands the meaning of this, please give me an answer." And then the student said, "The rabbit's horn is correct, the sheep's horn is false." I have no idea what. Then Mangong smiled. And then Zen Master Sung San said, "If you cannot hear the bell or the drum, you're free. If you hear both sounds, you're already in hell."
Yeah, so it's actually an old Chinese Buddhist saying that, and I can't remember. It has to do with the drum. So the bell and the drum are instruments that are used in a Buddhist temple or a Buddhist monastery to tell everybody what time of day it is. And everybody has a different activity or job or task or thing that they're supposed to be doing depending upon what time of day it is. So, so learning, so always, acting in accord with the drum and the bell is just a shorthand way of saying doing your job, basically. Um, but at the same time, if you just followed the drum and the bell, then you're just a robot. So on the one hand, if you're living in a community of people, and we all live in a community of some sort, I mean, we all live in among other human beings. Um, it's important for us to act harmoniously with others. But if we're just following orders or following the drum and the bell, or if we're just robots, then we're not even alive. Um, so, I there's a lot going on under the surface of a koan like that. Um, and generally speaking, a koan like that is assuming that it's being directed at people who already know what they're supposed to be doing and are already conscientious. So how can you be conscientious without being an automaton? How can you be conscientious and act in harmony with others? Because acting in harmony with others is often just going along with what everybody else is doing, right? So can you act in harmony with others and still be alive and still be real and still be, not just because what if what everyone else is doing is bad? you know, what if what everyone and that's often the case, you know. So acting harmoniously with others is very important. Being a good neighbor, being a good colleague at work, whatever, being a good driver when you're driving, you know. Um, but just following rules is not, you know,
You know,
it's not enough, and sometimes it's not the right thing. Often it is, often following the rules is what you should do, but it's not enough. And sometimes you shouldn't follow the rules. And so, how can you reach a state where, and of course, people have different levels of comfort with rules or whatever. I hate rules. I mean, my default mode of behavior is to, somebody's telling me there's a rule that has to be followed, is to, first of all, I don't trust that person anymore, and now I'm not going to do that, and that's not particularly constructive. It can keep you from being, sucked into other people's systems, but you still have to be careful about your own systems. But neither following rules nor not following rules is the answer. And so following the drum and the bell, basically that's following the rules is what that's referring to. But how can you get beyond the mind that either wants to follow the rules or not follow the rules? I don't know. When I look around, I see a lot of people need to learn how to follow the rules, in my opinion. But um, and then and then start from there. Uh, of course, except for the rules that I think are bad. I mean, sometimes there are rules that say, you know, not too long ago, within my lifetime, there were laws that said, black people and white people can't get married. You know, um, I mean, I live right across the border from the state of Virginia, which is where that there, the Supreme Court case, the state of Virginia versus Loving, because that was the name of the couple that got married. Their last name was Loving, and anyway, so and Martin Luther King used to like to point out, because Martin Luther King didn't follow the rules when the rules were wrong, and he said, everything that the Nazis did in Germany was legal according to their, system of laws and according to theirs. So anyway, I mean, again, not to get political, but just to say that it's good to live in harmony, and it's good to kind of, but anyway, so that's what the drum and the bell makes me think of. And, you know, I don't pretend to understand what that koan is getting on about. But I do know what the drum and the bell are talking about. That's talking about following the rules.
Uh, uh, th- that helps me, just knowing that, right? Because um, there are koans and, you know, just when like Catherine was reading that dialogue, you
Mm-hmm.
know,
Mm-hmm.
there are times when I would just feel as though I don't get it. I really don't get it. I'm just, you know,
Oh yeah.
and but knowing that there was specific knowledge that I wasn't aware of that kind of defined what that exchange was, then it's like, okay, maybe I have we talked about capacity before, right? I
Mm-hmm.
have the capacity to get it, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't have the specific knowledge of that referral
Mm-hmm.
to the drum and the bell, for
Mm-hmm.
instance. That
Yeah.
would have, if I had had that, if I had known that, that would have made sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I have to tell you, I have to warn you. I mean, that's my take on it. And so different people have different levels of knowledge of like, Chinese culture and little quotes and sayings. There's all kinds of there's Buddhist, Chinese and Japanese and Korean Buddhists, especially Zen Buddhists, were very big on collecting like sayings and little snippets of poetry that they thought was really cool, which we still do to this day. Oh, here's a great quote.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So I just happen to know that about the drum and the bell and what but maybe they mean other things to other people, or maybe there's other, you know, uh, context that I don't know about.
Hey, I found this little, it's just
Uh-huh.
a couple
Uh-huh.
paragraphs that Degas put about the Diamond Sutra. You want me
Mm-hmm.
to read it to you?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He says the Diamond Sutra say that past mind cannot attain
Ah.
enlightenment,
Mm-hmm.
future mind cannot attain enlightenment, and
Uh-huh.
present mind cannot
Mm-hmm.
attain enlightenment. So, what mind then can attain enlightenment?
Mm-hmm.
Listening is just like this. We cannot hear the sounds, cries,
Mm-hmm.
complaints, and yearnings of the world with past, future, or present minds. How then can we hear them? And then he says, listen. Mind is like the great sky. Awareness is like the great sky, containing everything, containing our aliveness, containing our energy, containing our sleepiness, containing our hopes, containing our delusions, containing our fears. Our whole life is contained in the great sky of being in this moment. This great sky has no meaning, and this no meaning is meaning beyond meaning. Great meaning in truth, which is compassionate action. Awake, all night, sounds of snowflakes.
Mm-hmm.
What's he talking about?
Well, yeah. Um, well, so this is a very, very, very famous saying from the Diamond Sutra, and there's a famous Zen story about it, which is where there was uh, I can't remember which monk is who it was, but there was a teacher who was an expert on the Diamond Sutra, and he was like traveling to go give a lecture on the Diamond Sutra, and I think I'm getting this story right. And he stops at a little restaurant along the way, and restaurant was owned and run by this little old lady. You always have
Yeah,
to be careful when little old ladies pop up in Zen stories. They're always Zen masters. Um,
yeah,
and and so she chats him up, and he says, "Oh yeah, I'm so and so, great Diamond Sutra scholar. I'm going to give a big lecture." And she says, "Oh, wonderful! I have a question. I was reading the Diamond Sutra, and I was really wondering." Um, Diamond Sutra says, um, "Past mind cannot." What does it say? Past mind cannot. I don't know.
Oh,
Whatever.
yeah. Past mind cannot attain enlightenment. Future mind cannot attain enlightenment. Present mind cannot
Yeah.
attain.
Hmm.
Then what mind can attain
Right.
enlightenment?
Right. And so the little old lady says, "So what mind are you going to eat lunch?" And then she says, "And if you can't answer, you don't get any lunch." you know. And so there's a I think it was I think it was Thich Nhat Hanh gave a little commentary on this story. She says, you know, there's really no reason to like be like that. why why not? The guy's hungry, just let him eat. Just
Yeah.
let the poor guy eat, So, but the fact that Zen Master Degak brings it back to listening, I think, is really interesting because one of his teachings on listening is that, you know, of course, and listening is a really wonderful example of something we always have the capacity to do. It's just there. Our ability to listen is always there. But do we listen? Well, um, sometimes yes, sometimes no. And um, but one of Zen Master Degak's one of his teachings on listening that I love the most is when he teaches, in order to listen, all you have to do is stop doing everything that isn't listening. And so all this idea of past mind, future mind, present mind, that's just thinking in words. That's not listening. If you're trying to figure out which mind it is you're going to listen with, then you're not listening. But as soon as you stop worrying about that, um, then you are listening. So
Yeah.
I think the immediacy of that is what he's getting at. Um, and the immediacy of it shows that we, on the one hand, like, it shows that we can do it. Uh, but we, it, it, in a moment, in an instant, I would go a little bit further than he goes, because in a moment or in an instant, you can do that, and you can see it, and you can experience. And every time we really listen to something, and one of the best ways of having that experience is when something catches you by surprise. When the sound catches you by surprise, everything else goes away, and you just hear that sound, and it's a moment of pure direct experience. But then as soon as it's over, then you think, oh, that was a moment of pure direct experience. That's not listening. Um, but I think there are practical things that we can do to help unlearn the behavior that gets in the way of listening all the time. Instead of, because sometimes it happens on its own spontaneously, which is wonderful, but it would be nice if it happened more often. And that is something we can work on. Getting rid of the greed, hatred, and ignorance. Abandoning the greed, hatred, and ignorance, as it says in the Four Great Vows.
How do you do that?
Well, one way that you do that is by um, having the intention to do that, and by having the some actually faith that you can do that. Because if you don't have some, so all the things we were talking about earlier about, you know, basic goodness or whatever you want to call it, it's kind of important to have that, because then when greed, hate, and ignorance arise in our own minds, we can realize that that is not who I am. Uh, and you often, for me, I realize that after it's a little too late, oh, that was not who I am. After I've already, gotten mad and said the thing that I shouldn't have said or done the thing I shouldn't have done. But still, it still is important to, return to that um, uh, realization that that's not who I am, to not identify with that. And then, so one of the hard parts is to kind of look at where did that come from, and and to own it for yourself. That was me getting mad, because I love to blame other people for my anger, um, and often other people have done things that make it very easy for me to blame them for my anger, because they've done things that are stupid and mean, um, therefore I can blame them for my anger. But their anger, their stupidness and meanness doesn't make me angry. I do that, um, you know That's a long that is a long path to work on that. But that's the the stages that Tom was referring to earlier. It's but it's good to have those experiences of immediacy and to have some realization of our own basic goodness, our Buddha nature. Um, and I think chanting the Heart Sutra helps to reinforce that. Um, that's one of the reasons why we have that as a practice.
Could you, Kurt, could you
Mhm.
send me a copy? Like, I can't find a copy online at all. It's
Of
just all these
yeah. So
interpretation. I mean,
oh yeah,
it's
of
just,
of the Heart Sutra itself or the Dharma
yeah,
Sutra
just
or
the text.
yeah.
Just, I cannot find it.
Okay. Yep. I can do
Catherine,
that. Hmm?
can I ask you, Catherine, what chapter that is you're reading from? I'd like
Oh,
to.
yeah, it's, well, let's see. It's page 86 and 87. So, do you have this book?
Yeah.
I'm not sure what chapter that is, but
Now I remember you sent me a question about from that book a while back, Catherine, and it was about something where uh, Zen Master Dagak was actually, I don't think it was a story about the drum and the bell, but there's another
yeah.
place where he's talking about listening, but he's actually quoting from the Surangama Sutra.
Oh, yeah. I
Yeah,
don't remember the question I asked
yeah,
you, but yeah,
yeah,
I did ask you a question
yeah.
about
And
his book.
the Surangama Sutra is way above my pay grade. Um,
Oh, really?
yeah, well, I mean, it's something that I'm working on, but I have uh, uh, yeah, it's important. It's good stuff. Um, uh, but
Oh,
hmm
well, I was looking through our chats here on Facebook, you
hmm
and me, and I
hmm
found one question that I asked you.
uh-huh,
Dagak, he gave a little talk at LZC one
hmm
day, and
hmm
he said if somebody called him a knucklehead, he'd say thank you.
yes.
And I sent you a question. What in the world is he talking about?
Oh, really? I don't remember that, but yeah, I mean that's so. There's another really wonderful story that sometimes Zen Master Dagak refers to this very famous story about the two monks who are traveling along, and they come to a river, and there's a woman who's crying because she can't get across the river, and she has to take
Oh,
medicine
yeah.
to her mother, and one of the monks picks her up and carries her across, and then when they get back to their monastery, the other monk reports him. Uh,
Yeah.
and so the famous zinger at the end of it is that the monk who had carried the woman across says, well, I put her down when we got to the other side of the river, but you've been carrying her ever since. And then Master Degak says, if he had been there and he had been the monk who had carried the woman across the river, he would have just bowed and said thank you for your teaching, instead of playing, instead of having a snappy comeback and
Just
putting
let
the
it
other,
go.
just let it go. Thank you for your teaching. Because there's really no need to engage in a
Mhm.
situation like that. So if somebody calls you a knucklehead, um, and and you can even take it a step further because one of the best ways of working on anger is on working on it when you have it, you know. And if somebody says something that makes you angry, then if you can just bow and say thank you for your teaching, that's a wonderful practice. One that I aspire to, but often do not um, get to that point. And some teachers go so far as to say that in fact that person who makes you angry is your teacher because unless somebody makes you angry, you never have the chance to work on it. And it is only when someone makes you angry that you have this opportunity to make progress, on your path. And so that person has done you a great service, a great teaching.
The only thing is nobody can actually make us angry, right? I mean,
Well,
that's a
that's
codependent thing. I can feel angry if somebody does something, but
that's
they're
right.
not actually making me
Well,
angry.
and so and but the only way you can see that is when somebody makes you angry,
Or
and
yeah,
then
does something that upset
and
where
then
I feel upset.
you can see, that came from me.
Hmm.
Um, so there is anger. You can't pretend that you're not angry. You have to have that, the self-awareness to be honest with yourself and say, oh yeah, that made me angry, but that really didn't make me angry, but I did experience anger, um, in response to what someone else did or said, but that was coming from me, not from them.
Hmm.
And that's a hard one. That's very hard. And the better an excuse someone else gives you for being angry, the harder it is for you to see it as your own response.
Yeah.
And we could even convince ourselves, well, I have to get angry, because they're doing something terrible and I have to stop it. Well, the anger, so if there is something constructive that you can do to help some other person or to stop them from doing something constructive, then you should do it. But anger has nothing to do with it. You don't have, we and there is actually a very pervasive idea in our culture that anger is a source of, that we need anger to have the energy to fix things that are wrong. And I think that's a fundamental misunderstanding of what anger really is. um, the energy to fix things that are wrong doesn't come from blaming others for how you feel, which is what anger
Right.
is.
Well, that's why that word make, it comes
Yeah, yeah.
across as they're
Hmm.
responsible for my
Right.
anger,
That's
you
right.
know,
Hmm.
and they aren't.
Right.
Thich Nhat Hanh one
Hmm.
time had this story about anger and about being in a boat,
Hmm.
and there was another boat that came by. This man was in a boat,
Hmm.
and you probably know this story. And um, the boat came close to him, and the water started going up and down on his boat, and he started getting really upset, very, very angry at whoever was in that boat was
Uh-huh.
purposely, he made up this story in his head.
Right.
Well, then as the boat came closer, he realized there wasn't anybody in the boat. It was just a vacant boat that was just
Hmm.
sloshing around out there.
Hmm.
And then he realized, he had made this whole narrative up in his head,
Right.
and that there was no intention on that boat's part. It was
Hmm.
just a boat.
Yeah, that's a good story.
Yeah.
Well, it's a little after 8. We should probably leave. We should probably end with just chanting the Heart Sutra one more time. That be
Okay.
okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, if I just gotta find the Heart Sutra here to chant somewhere. Oops. Gotta share my screen and mute myself.
Dhammaha
Prajnaparamita Hridaya Sutra Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, when practicing deeply the Prajnaparamita, perceives that all five skandhas are empty and is saved from all suffering and distress. Shariputra, form does not differ from emptiness. Emptiness does not consciousness, Shariputra. All dharmas are marked with emptiness. They do not appear or disappear, are not tainted or pure, do not increase or decrease. Therefore, in emptiness, no form, no feelings, perceptions, impulses, consciousness, no eyes, no ears, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no color, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no object of mind, no realm of eyes, and so forth until no realm of mind, consciousness, no ignorance, and also no extinction of it, and so forth until no old age and death, and also no extinction of them, no suffering, no origination, no stopping, no path, no cognition, also no attainment, nothing to attain. The bodhisattva depends on prajnaparamita, and the mind is no hindrance. Without any hindrance, no fears exist. Far apart from every perverted view, one dwells in nirvana. In the three worlds, all Buddhas depend on prajnaparamita and attain anuttara samyak sambodhi. Therefore know that prajnaparamita is the great transcendent mantra, is the great bright mantra, is the utmost mantra, is the supreme mantra, which is able to relieve all suffering and is true, not false. So proclaim the prajnaparamita mantra, proclaim the mantra which says gate gate para gate para sangate bodhisattva, gate gate para gate para sangate bodhisattva, gate gate para gate para sangate bodhisattva.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Catherine. It's great talking to you.
Thank you. Good
Thank
night.
you.
And thank you for persevering despite the problems that I had getting the correct link out to people.
Was I the only one that had the problem, or did you have problems, Tom?
Well, I just clicked on the link that came with today's email,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I did, but I couldn't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. And he had the same experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was confusing because I said he was in another meeting. So.
I made you confused. Or did I?
Do you? But you
No, I said it was confusing.
it was confusing, right? That's
It was.
right.
It was. I know. I know. And I caused the confusion. Pretty clear. Yeah. All right. Good night. Bye bye.
Okay. Good night.